First of all, who has decided to stick with your New Year's resolution so far? Anybody? No? Okay. So we're almost we're almost through January, and all of us are like, yeah, I think we're good here. Um, if you started to work out, if you started to go to a gym this year, this might be a little bit easier for you. You're like, ooh, what are we gonna do? Push-up challenge right now. No. But what I do want you to do, this actually, I'm serious on this. I want everybody to choose one arm and go straight out front in front of you. Make a fist, because if you don't make a fist, it can look weird. But and don't go beside you because you're going to hit the person next to you. But I want you to choose an arm and hold your arm straight at 90 degrees out in front of you as long as you can. Ready, set, go. Now, I have already mentioned previously that I've been on this journey in my life, in the world today. Like, I'm learning how to find a better rhythm, a better pace in my life in recent years. For a long time, I didn't. For a long time, it was just a sprint, 100%, all the time, straightforward. Not great rhythm on that. I grew up in a household with a pretty strong work ethic. Like, the expectation was just that we would do things. Like, we were constantly doing things. And if my normal was serving my parents, kind of. Like, whatever mom and dad needed, I was doing. I did my homework, I did the chores, and if I had all of my stuff done, the norm was not for me to just like sit down and relax. The norm was to go find something else to do. So with my parents, if my dad was ever, when my dad was home from work, I would go find my dad and just do whatever he was doing. We're raking leaves, I'm raking leaves beside him. He's working on the car, I'm holding the flashlight. Like, whatever I can do to help him out. That's just the way it was for me. How are arms doing? A little tired, a little sore so far? I was always right beside my dad, and I loved it. This mentality is always running in the background of my brain. Like, I've always got to be doing something. In the moments that I decide, okay, I'm going to stop, I feel guilty. And I recognize that different people function at different paces, and they do different things to recover. And my wife, she likes to watch TV, like to recover from the day, because she's a little bit of an introvert, and she needs to not talk to people for a while. So if I want to spend time with her, that's what we're doing at that point. And for me, like, in the back of my mind, I'm just like, I'm not doing something, though. Like, I am lazy right now is what I'm telling myself. And I don't like that. I feel guilty about it. There's just this low-level grade of guilt all the time. As I moved into the role of a pastor, I got real excited because my history was that I volunteered for a long time. Amy and I moved up here from Bible college to volunteer. I don't know if you've ever thought about that. It's like, hey, we're going to move to a different state, and then we're just going to volunteer. That's why we're here. We did that for a while, and then I got brought on part-time and then full-time, and then had some financial stuff happen, and went back to part-time and then no time, and I volunteered for another stint of like 5 more years. So by the time that I was brought back on full-time with the intention of becoming the lead pastor, it was like pure joy. I got to do with my days what I wanted to do all the time. It was awesome. It was amazing. And so for me, it wasn't work. There's that saying, like, if you find what you love to do, you won't work a day in your life. That's literally what I felt. So I'm just going. I'm just running 100 miles an hour as fast as I can. And there's a pastor that was a friend of mine. I used the term friend loosely. He knew who I was. We emailed back and forth a couple times. He's kind of a big deal. His name is Jeff Henderson. He's now this big entrepreneur, like whatever. But Jeff told me this at one point. He said, Andrew, you can't outrun your volunteers or you'll run out of volunteers. There's a lot of wisdom in that. A lot of wisdom in that. So I took that and I was like, that's really smart. So I better slow down enough so that I can do their job and mine. And here's the thing. When you are the leader, people are watching what you're doing, and they're recognizing, well, he's still working. That means that I need to do more too. And people weren't. It was the opposite of this. I continued to outwork them, outpace them, outrun them, and it was not healthy. And it burned a lot of volunteers out at this point. We still got anybody with arms up? You're doing good. Is sore you switch out yet? You can't. That's cheating. I just seeing if anyone's honest. A few years ago, like I mentioned earlier, I found myself at a place that I just couldn't go any longer. I could go, but I was recognizing I shouldn't go, if you know what that means. Like I was starting to feel things that I'd never felt before. I'm not an angry person. Never have been. Like I'm not angry. In fact, there's like very few times that I've actually felt the emotion of just pure anger. And all of a sudden, I started to meet this new character that was inside of me. I was like, well, hello, anger. Nice to meet you. It was different. I had zero margin for people. Normally, I have a tremendous amount of patience. I can last a long time in conversations, even if I am not enjoying myself. But all of a sudden, I found that I couldn't stay in that spot. I had to leave. I had to be short. I had to cut it off and walk away. And that was not like me. I didn't have relational margin. I didn't have patience. And I was tired nonstop. To some of you, you might be thinking, well, that's just you getting older, Andrew. Yeah, maybe. That's just parenthood. Maybe a little bit of that too. But I don't care what season of life I'm in. That's not how I want to function because that's not who I am. I'm not someone that's impatient. I'm patient. I'm not someone that has anger just right underneath the surface. I'm kind. I'm generous. I'm not angry. And I especially don't want that to be part of any season of life when that is coming out on Luke and Amy. You see, burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. And I was experiencing the front end of burnout. And what I recognized really quickly is if nothing happened, if nothing changed, it was going to be bad. And I didn't want that. I don't know if you're in a similar spot than that, but we are talking today about burnout. I promise you that even if you're not in that spot, you know some people that are. You might be related to them, you might be married to them, you might work with them, but you know people that are experiencing burnout currently. So right now we are in part 4 of How Are You Doing Really? This series is all about mental health. This is a series where we wanted to take a deep dive, and actually it's probably not deep enough, but at least scratch the surface on some topics that honestly don't get brought up enough. You know, we're starting to, take a turn in our society where people are talking more a little bit about mental health, but talking about it and making some changes about it and taking action on it are two different things. And our hope is that throughout this series, that if you or someone you know is wrestling and struggling with some of these things, that you would take a step in the direction towards health, that you would do something about this. And what's really, really important, I'm saying this every single week, you can have a growing faith in Jesus and mental health challenges at the same time. It's not an either or. It's also not a sin to struggle with mental health distress. As Christians, unfortunately, we immediately start to think, oh, something's wrong in the world. It's got to be sin. There's got to be something that you're doing. And it's the same thing that was happening when Jesus was walking. If anybody had any type of detriment, if anybody was hurt in any way, if anybody was lame in any way, if you were blind or if you were mute or whatever it might be, immediately the religious people of the day would equate that to either you sinned or your parents sinned. Somehow there's sin. This is a judgment on your life. But the reality is sometimes it's just life. Life comes at you fast and hard. And sometimes it hits you when you don't expect it to. And it knocks you off balance. And sometimes that affects our mental health. So for me, when I started to recognize some of those pieces, the pieces that I didn't want to be a characteristic of my life, I started to have some difficult conversations with people that I trusted and respected, people that have been down similar roads before, and start asking those questions. Hey, what is this about? I'm feeling this. I've never felt this before. Why? And having those conversations. And ultimately what I came to a conclusion on is that my current rhythm of life was undermining who I wanted to be in life. But the further down that burnout trail you run, it actually prevents you from the work you feel like you should be doing. You get to a spot where you lose your motivation to do the thing that you prioritize. You're like, that's the thing that I've been running on the hamster wheel for like over and over and over. That's my high value, high priority thing. And then you find yourself all of a sudden one day you're like, I don't even want to do that thing anymore. You start to despise the thing that you've been chasing. You become more cynical and absolutely even physically exhausted. To be honest with you, that's usually the moment someone's like, I know what you need. You need a vacation, which sounds great. I'm like, yes, I do. I'll do it. But this is not something a vacation, just one big vacation can fix. A vacation is great. It's good to get away and unplug for a little while. But what we're talking about is the ongoing discipline in the weirdest possible way. It requires you to move at a slower pace. Usually we think of discipline as more, harder, faster. This type of discipline, when you're experiencing burnout, it requires you to back off of the accelerator a little bit. You've got to hold yourself back from moving forward so fast. You got to slow down a bit. Start asking some different questions, some better questions. Do I want to appear perfect or to be healthy? Because for a long time, it's really easy. It's like, yeah. I need everybody to know that I'm doing this the right way, that I'm earning my way, that everybody sees it. But is the appearance of perfection or health, is that the priority? Do I want to be known as a hard worker or a loving husband and present father? Every single man in the room just said, well, both. All of the above. But there's a difference here. At some point, those two start battling against each other, and you have to make a decision, which one am I going to cheat? Andy Stanley has this great book, Choosing to Cheat. At some point, you have to decide, either my work or my family is going to get the short end of the stick, and I have to decide on that. And like I said, something had to change or nothing would change at all. In the current path, the current trajectory, the current direction I was moving in, if I didn't make some changes, nothing would change. And I didn't want to end up down that road. Because that was not who I wanted to be. That's not who I saw myself as. That's not who I believe that God created me to be. I'm a lesser version of myself down that road. Now, I believe that God is doing something special and amazing here at Canyons Church. And it's not dependent on me. It's dependent on God. So I can't earn it. I can't make it happen. And at the same time, here's what else I know. That if I don't move at a healthy pace, if I don't make sure that I'm disciplining myself into health rather than perfection, or the appearance of perfection, that I have the capacity as the leader of Canyons Church to undermine everything that's happening. I can blow the whole thing up real quick. Like 3 decisions. I can ruin it all in one day. And whatever you care about most, you can do the same also. We're never too far away from ruining the things that we love the most, the things that we value, the things that we care about. And so our health, making sure that we are processing life, that we're moving through life at a healthy pace is incredibly, incredibly important. I know that there's an edge to that feels a little bit arrogant, but honestly, we see leaders all the time. We see, pastors, we see leaders of organizations, and when they don't have that pace piece figured out, when they still are trying to perform to look and appear perfect, we see this. We see them burn out, and eventually they start making some horrible choices. And then if they don't already have podcasts, there's other podcasts about them written and shared all over. Those are not the podcasts that we want. And this is unfortunate. Maybe on a very, a smaller scale, like in the globe and around the world, but maybe even more pronounced in a heavier burden is within the families that you see and know. Right? Because that's felt. You've seen this, maybe you've experienced it before. When someone runs their family into the ground, when someone bails on their family, when someone starts to prioritize work or whatever it might be, the pursuit of something else over their family, over their faith, over their values, the family eventually implodes. Eventually it disappears. And it's heartbreaking. So, a couple of difficult questions for you. When was the last time you spent a full day resting? I knew someone was going to laugh. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to wait for it until it happens. Because that sounds ridiculous. Like if you're in the middle of your career right now, if you're a parent right now, you're like, what are you talking about? That's not real life. When was the last time that you didn't do chores, you didn't do cleaning, you didn't cart your kids all the way around, you didn't catch up on any projects, you weren't the family Uber driver going to practices or games or performances? When was the last time you just took a day? When was the last time you spent a full day with the people you love doing the things that refuel you? Now I get it. There's a percentage of you in this room right now that you're like, refuel and spending time with people are not the same thing for me. I get it. I understand it. But when was the last time that you prioritized refueling yourself in life? Where you got to the point where you actually slowed down enough to get your eyes up off of the busyness. Right? We say this all the time, how busy we are. Where we slow down enough that we're not busy for the day. That we can regain and refine kind of the balance again. That the deep breathing is not about frustration, but there's a level of just calm and peace. When was the last time you did that? Most specifically, do you have one day a week where you rest and refuel weekly? Do you have a day where you do this, not just once, but where you prioritize unhurried time with God, processing with yourself, taking some time with those that you love? I was mistaken in thinking that because I was doing things for God, I was spending time with God as a pastor. It's not a great thing to admit in front of you, but that's the reality. Is I was studying and I was preparing, I was doing all these things and doing, but I was not being with God. And I know what you're thinking, like, okay, what kind of a fantasy world do you live in? Who can actually do that? It's not because you do it, with all of the items checked off on your list. That's not why you do. You don't have to wait. You don't wait until everything's done and then you do this. You prioritize time ahead of doing. There's a million things. There's laundry, there's grocery shopping, there's appointments, there's this and that and the other. Like all of this stuff is still on your list. And yet, you choose to prioritize some downtime, some time to refuel, some time to spend intentionally with God and with those that you love. If you struggle with this, chances are you're a little bit of a rule follower. You're like, I got to get my list done first. Or maybe, and you're like, no, not me, I just don't do it. But maybe you have an internal list you haven't written down, but you have a list of values and priorities that you're still following. There's an unspoken or unwritten set of rules that you are following to the T. And you've decided what they are. It drives you. So to start off this morning, we're going to look at some rules. Just for all my rule followers, we can all be happy together. Let me give you a little bit of context. At this point, God has rescued Israelites out of Egypt. They've been enslaved for hundreds of years, and all of a sudden, God decides it's time for my people to move out of slavery and move towards their land that I've promised them. But they're in slavery. So God actually raises up this leader, Moses, and he actually allows them to, he really fights with Pharaoh for a little bit. It's wild. There's some plagues that happen. It's fascinating. Read your Bibles. But there's a lot that happens, and all of a sudden the Israelites find themselves out in the wilderness. They're out of, they're no longer enslaved. They have a relationship with God, but they have no rules. And this is really important, that he gave the rules before he gave the laws. That he actually gave the laws in order to protect the relationship with him, rather than giving the rules in order to have relationship with him. There's a big difference there. Now, for us, I think we better pay attention to this, because imagine this. The creator of the world decided to give the Israelites, his chosen people, some rules, some laws that would make life better, make relationships better. And this is straight from the creator of life. So we should not take this lightly. He gives the Israelites these 10 basic commandments. You can find them in Exodus chapter 20. We're kind of going to run through them this morning. The first one, don't have any other gods. There's only one God and one alone. You are not to have multiple gods, which was completely unheard of. Like at this time, culturally, it was polytheistic. Everybody had multiple gods. Whatever, the kind of the regularity in life is that you would process through life and you try to figure out which God you needed to appease in order to get what you want, which I know that sounds distant and also very familiar at the same time. I'm not going to push on that too hard this morning, though. Second rule, no image created to represent him. Now, again, within the mentality of the day, this would have been unheard of. Because every god had representation. Every single god had an idol, an image that they would create to worship. And that's exactly the point that God was making. I don't want you to be worshiping something representative of me. I want you to be worshiping me alone. Because sometimes we start to worship and prioritize an object over the actual one that we're in relationship with. So, next rule. Don't misuse God's name. And again, this one, we often think, well, that just means don't swear. Like, don't take God's name in vain. Don't swear. It's a little bit more than that. In fact, the words here, if you try to transliterate them effectively, it's take his name upon you falsely. So don't present God inaccurately to those around you. Represent him well. Now, we're going to get to the fourth, but before we get to the fourth, we're going to leapfrog it and go 5 through 10. These might be even more familiar for you. Honor your father and mother. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't give false testimony. Don't covet. Right? Don't covet is like don't desire. Don't lust after. Don't be jealous of something that somebody else has that you want. Right? So, no going on social media. That's just me. Okay. Now, notice all of these are after number 4. The first 3 really are about your relationship with God, right? Don't have any other gods before me. Don't misrepresent him. Don't create an image to represent him. Like, those are all about your relationship with God. These are all about your relationship with people, horizontally, beside you, the people that you sit next to right now. We're familiar with these. We might be a little bit less familiar with the other ones. The thing that is unique about number 4 is it's got a foot in both camps. It both prioritizes the relationship we have with God as well as the one that we have with people. And this is from chapter 20, verse 8. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Now the Sabbath day, literally, Sabbath means day of rest. Holy means set apart, completely other than, not the same as, different than all the others. So make this day different than all of the other days and take a day of rest. All the other days we're working, this day we're not working. It continues, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord, directional, intentional, your God. On it you shall not do any work. Neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. Now, I I can honestly say at least one aspect of this I've never done. Like, I've never forced any male or female servant to work on the Sabbath. I've never done that. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Now, big question. This is one of those Bible college questions, so be prepared. Did God need to rest on the seventh day? If God was big enough to create the universe and all that's in it, do you think he was just too tired for that seventh day? He's like, whew, I need a nap. I don't think so. Like, honestly, I don't think he was too tired. And here's a couple ideas. I don't think we should wait until we're too tired to take a rest either. Pace. Right? We get so wrapped up in what we're doing, we don't slow down to take a beat. And God from the outset gives us the example. God who never needs to take a rest. He's never too tired. He's never completely spent. He showed us by example, this is how you're to move through life. That you're to work and then not work. You're to work and then not work. And I know that this sounds old. I know it sounds antiquated. I know it sounds like something that somebody else should do, but not me, with my circumstances, with my pressure, with my tension, with my workload, with my. I get that. But this is one of the 10 commandments, straight from the creator of life, to help us have a better life. Do you get to pick and choose? It sounds impossible, I get it. I mean, we scramble right now just to find minutes or maybe at most an hour in our week to do something. It's like, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks from now, maybe a month from now. And I get it, right? I get it. I understand it. But before you check out and before you just tune out and start thinking about the football games that are happening today or whatever it might be, what I want you to do instead of arguing with me about your calendar, your schedule, is take a minute to listen to what is happening in our society. Right now, the studies show that 75% of people have experienced burnout. 3/4. 3 out of 4 people. That's more than the person on one or the other side of you. That's like all 3 of you, and then somebody gets a break. That's a lot of people in here. And that's a lot of people out there that are experiencing burnout. The last few years, especially, what we've seen statistically is it's the public servants, the people that are actually serving the public, that are experiencing this more on a higher rate than others. Your teachers, people in the medical field, your first responders, your law enforcement officers, right? These people, the ones that are making sure that life happens and is good for the rest of us, are experiencing burnout at a higher rate. No bueno. 66% of working parents in the United States suffers from parental burnout. That was really hard. 66%, 2/3 of parents that are working suffer from parental burnout. 71% of teenagers have experienced burnout. And this one's scary. Because teenagers should just be joyful. They don't have the pressures of the world on them yet, or they're not supposed to. And yet, what do we see? They're feeling the weight of the world on them already. Our current pace is not healthy. We're seeing the bitter fruit come to fruition. That bitter fruit is there. We're seeing it. We're experiencing it. And not only that, we're passing it along to our kids at a rapid rate. Burnout is occurring because our pace of life is unsustainable. We go and we go and we go and we go and we go until the wheels fall off. And we'll figure out what to do when the wheels fall off, but until the wheels fall off, we're going to keep on barreling through. We were not designed to live this way. We aren't. Uh, just think about this for a second. Think about life without the internet. Some of us can because we lived it. We don't have to imagine. Think about life without light bulbs. Think about life without electricity. Life was different not so long ago. I mean, these are all just like in the last couple hundred years. There's a lot of time before that. In fact, all of the time before that, we didn't have electricity. We didn't have light bulbs. We didn't have the internet. And the pace of life was dictated by something other than a light switch. When the sun came up, when the sun setted, it was a different pace. Said it, I know I said it. There's a couple English teachers in the room, which is extremely embarrassing. I get it. In addition, though, there's some research that's coming out that's showing it's not only just being overworked, that there's some other aspects that find their way into our level of burnout. It's doing meaningless work as well, work without purpose. Now, if I had given you purpose in raising your hand other than just raising your hand, I promise you, you would have been able to hold it longer. I gave you no purpose. And we got tired when Britt put it down. The work that was there, we quit on. At the same time, this is not hard. Everybody can lift their arm up for a while, but over time it gets heavier, it gets harder. And that's exactly what moving through life at an unsustainable pace is. It gets heavier and harder the longer that you hold it. Burnout also occurs when a person feel like they don't have a say in the end result. That they're just asked to do all these tasks and all these meaningless things, and there's no actual difference made at the end of the day. When someone feels overwhelmed and unsupported, burnout increases. Burnout is absolutely connected to our inability to maintain healthy boundaries in our life. You find yourself in situations where you can't say no to the things now, so you have a chance to say yes to the better things later. We have this worry, this fear that if we say no now, we won't be able to experience what we really want to experience later. And because of that, we give up on our healthy boundaries. We give up on our pace. We give up on things that we value for now. Later down the road, it'll happen. But right now, no, I just got to keep my head down and keep working. And what we see is that this increase in an unhealthy pace, unsustainable pace, leads to burnout, it leads to anxiety, and it leads to depression. So, what do we do about this? Well, for right now, we're going to take a look at one of the prophets, Elijah. Elijah was a prophet during King Ahab, his reign over Israel. King Ahab was married to Queen Jezebel. This was in the did I hear a boo? Someone booed. Appropriate. This was in the mid-800s BC. Elijah at this time was right around 30 years old or so. And in this moment, he confronts Baal worship. So King Ahab had invited, because of Jezebel, they'd invited worship of other gods into Israel. And they had all these priests and all these other, people that were doing this Baal worship. Baal was the other god. And Elijah felt like God was telling him, I've had enough. We're going to put an end to this. So they came up with this incredible miracle challenge. I love it. It's competition. I'm all about it. So Elijah says, okay, you and all of your guys over there, I'm going to let you have as long as you want to try to let your God consume your sacrifice on an altar. And he just sits back. There's hundreds of them. They start off with the day and they got everything. They're doing it all exactly right and perfect, and they're doing their chants or whatever, and they're gradually growing in their intention and intensity. Their voices gradually start to raise because nothing is happening. They're starting to scream and shout. get more and more animated. And I love this because Elijah starts talking trash. He's like, maybe he can't hear you yet. Scream louder. I can still hear your voice. You haven't lost it yet. Use it all. Maybe he's on the bathroom. I don't know. Like literally, that's what he says. And at some point, Elijah's like, all right, my turn. It's been hours. And he makes this altar. And he digs a trough, a trench around the altar. And once he places the sacrifice on top, he pours jar after jar of water onto the altar. I don't know about you, if you're familiar with fire and water don't mix very well. So the whole idea was that the God would consume the sacrifice with fire, and here he is pouring water on it until that trench filled up. And then he prayed a very simple prayer. And in that moment, God showed up and consumed by flame the entire altar, everything that was on it, and licked up. It absorbed and evaporated all of the water that was in the trench as well. I mean, this was a miracle. You ever prayed, God, give me a sign? God, let me see something happen? I mean, this was exactly that. This was like, it was so obvious, so clear. You would think that in this moment, Elijah would be like, game winner, he shoots, he scores, now let's go celebrate. Instead, he responds in fear out of what Jezebel might do, because she said, I'm coming after him. I'm going to kill him. You see, there's a toll of stress on a human, even a Bible hero. There's a toll of repeated, ongoing stress. Over time, we start to behave differently than we should. Exhaustion and fatigue has a way of evaporating our courage and exposing our fears. We're going to pick up in 1 Kings chapter 19. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Now, first things first, what do we do the moment we start to get exhausted, the moment we start to experience burnout? We isolate. Like, this is the temptation. We get alone. I'm just going to remove myself from all those people. We're designed for community. When we're struggling, we need our community around us. Church makes a difference. Small groups make a difference. Your relationships make a difference, especially in the moments that you need them there. And yet we have this temptation, we have this fear thing, we have this pride thing that gets in our way, and instead we push people away. And that's exactly what Elijah does. Elijah leaves the one guy that's been with him. He disconnects from everyone, and he hits rock bottom. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Have you ever been glad that God didn't answer one of your prayers? He feels empty, right? He's exhausted. He's like, I can't take it anymore. I'm done. He feels like nothing has changed. Even though he just did this amazing, miracle just happened. And yet he doesn't feel like anything's changed. He still feels like he's all alone. He feels like he's battling an uphill battle that cannot be won. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. And I'm assuming, I'm just guessing here, I'm assuming he was hoping that he would just fall asleep and then God would take him. Like, let this happen in my sleep, please. That he wouldn't wake up. All at once, an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Restoration is not just about correcting. It's restoring, right? And the first thing that needed to happen was his physical state needed to be restored. He needed rest. He needed food. He needed water. He was running on empty on all of those. Your physical and mental self, your physical and mental health are connected. They're both part of you. And often, our physical self fails before our mental self. Like we start to be done physically, and our mind still wants to go. But he was depleted. The only cure for an unsustainable pace is a slower one. It's a slower one. We have to slow down. We can't just keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. I'm going to take a rest, take a beat, and then push some more. It's finding out what the pace of life needs to be. And I understand because this was me, and this is the process and journey that I'm still in the middle of. I'm not there yet. It feels like giving up, and it feels like quitting. It feels like I'm admitting that I'm not strong enough to do what I want to do. Because so much of me just wants to work harder. I can outwork the exhaustion. I want to prove my value and my worth by how hard I work. And yet that has driven me to the brink of unhealth. So I have to slow down. And slowing down feels like I'm quitting. It feels like I'm giving up. It feels like I'm saying, okay, God, I can't. And that's exactly the spot you need to be in. Okay, God, I can't, but you can. So how can we create margin? Right? This is the whole tension. I would like to do that, but how do I do that? I would like to have time in my week to have a day set aside, but how do I do that? Often by saying no to some things, and even good things that are on your calendar, that you've already said that you'd be at, that you'd be part of. Things that aren't necessarily helpful, but are good. You're like, they're a positive thing. Here's what I really want to emphasize. Don't say no to the things that are helpful. We say no to the things that are easy to say no to. When I was doing student ministry, and I apologize if anyone's experienced this before, I totally understand it. And at the same time, I'm going to tell you what my inner thoughts are. So my wife and I did student ministries for a super long time. And there's this thing that would happen on a regular basis where a student would get in trouble. They'd have, bad attitude at home. They'd get in trouble at school, whatever. And for punishment, the parent wouldn't let them go to youth group. And I internally would think, that's ridiculous. Because here's what happens. Yes, youth group is fun, and we try to make it fun and engaging and exciting, and your friends are there, and you have youth leaders there that care about you, and they're super cool and hip and whatever else. I don't know. That's what we hope for. But a parent was pulling a student away from another voice that would say the same thing. A parent would be pulling a student away from an influence that could be a positive influence rather than a negative one. Yes, I understand that discipline needs to happen, but pulling a student away from what is helpful is not helpful. I don't know if you need to say that on repeat, but pulling yourself away from something that is helpful is not helpful. It's easier to cancel on some of those things than others. But what is most beneficial is the better question. Let me ask you this. What's easier? To not show up to church? Yeah, no one's taking attendance. No one's checking a box. No one's doing that. It's easy not to show up. What's easier, not to show up to a small group? I mean, yeah, if I'm not feeling well, I got something going on, I have an excuse. Yeah, I get it. Most people are pretty understanding. Yeah, my schedule's pretty busy too. I totally understand. Take the night off. It's fine. Is it easier to cancel on that or to cancel on the thing that you told your child that you were going to do, and you're like, we really want to go see that movie together, but buddy, you can't do that right now? That's a hard one. That's a lot harder. To actually cancel on something that's been on the calendar. There's that get-together, the hangout, the whatever it might be, the event that you've planned that you've actually been in charge of. You're like, well, I have these two things I can't do both. I got to choose one. You're going to bail on the one that's easier to bail on, right? But it's not always the one that's better to bail on. Elijah had to get back to a place and pace where he could actually hear God again, where he could actually engage with God again, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Notice the angel actually gave him some meaning in there. There's something ahead that I have planned for you, that God has planned for you, and you're not ready for it. You're not strong enough for it. You need to do something now so you will be ready for it. There's purpose. That's a purpose statement. There's meaning all of a sudden. And again, Elijah, over time, after he starts to get his body right again, he actually is able to go somewhere. The end of the story is that he hears from God in the whisper. And what God tells him is that there is a number of people, there's a large amount of people, there's a remnant of people that Elijah doesn't know about, that have never knelt before another God. It's the exact thing that Elijah wanted, but didn't know existed. Not only that, but God actually starts to set up a trainee for him, that eventually he has this apprentice that takes over for him, takes over his office, which is really confusing because his name is Elisha. So Elijah and Elisha. Just to make it easy, though, here's a quick tip. They're alphabetical, so you're welcome. For us, though, what we have to do, in the hard part that we have to do, if we want to change anything at all, if you want to change the pace, if you want to change the direction, if you want to change the end goal of where you're going to land, we've got to change today something. Because if we don't change anything, nothing changes. So the first thing we have to do is evaluate your calendar and then adjust it. Evaluate it and adjust it. You're like, I look at my calendar, I can't find a day to take off. Exactly. So some things have to be crossed off the list in order to make room to take a day off. And I get this. This is hard. This is a challenge. To block off a day sounds ridiculous. What do you mean? I got bills to pay. I get it. I get it. I also understand that taking time away from the busyness of life allows you to reconnect with your Heavenly Father that, to be honest, has been waiting to reconnect with you for a long time, or maybe to connect with you for the first time. That there's a God that loves you, that cares about you, that created you, that knows you better than you know you. And He is waiting for that date. He is waiting for that moment. He is waiting for you to clear enough space to interact and engage with Him. And this is not just like, I'm just going to sit in the quiet and pray to God for 24 hours a day. That's hard. This is also spending time with family, people that I love. This is also doing things that are beneficial for me. Reading instead of being on my phone. Turn the phone off. Go outside and touch some grass. Get some vitamin D, and not in pill form, but in sunshine. It's beautiful out there. It's a little cold, but it's out there. Refuel yourself. Refuel your soul. A day without hurry. No getting to what's next. There's no rush. There's no, I got to get this done. No. We're not doing that today. We're going about today slow. Re-energize. Reset your pace. You were designed to take a Sabbath, to have a Sabbath. It was created for you, right? That God created the Sabbath for you to slow down. It's good for you. It's good for the whole family. And honestly, there's probably a conversation that needs to happen with the whole family. Because if only one of you are trying to do this, it's going to be even more difficult. Everybody needs to get on the same page. Doing it one time feels good. Doing it consistently over time, you start to reap the rewards of it. We all need it. Everybody needs it. Part of the Sabbath is learning to trust God. I'm going to let go of the things that I'm trying to squeeze onto, and I'm going to trust God with it. I get that. But when I do that, I'm a better leader, I'm a better husband, I'm a better father, I'm a better friend. And this is the challenge. This is the hard part. The difficulty is that we trade the abundant life that is promised to us, that is given to us, that is available to us. We trade abundant life for stuff, for fear of losing stuff. And to be honest, that's a bad trade-off. It truly is. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything that you do for us. God, we thank you that you have been waiting for us. God, I pray that we would do the hard part of trying to figure out how to adjust a schedule, try to adjust our pace to slow down enough that we don't miss you. God, you have gifts for us. You have things for us that you're trying to hand to us, and we're running right past you at 60 miles an hour. Lord, I pray that we would slow down and learn that you are trustworthy, that we don't have to hold the whole life together, our whole life and everything about it together. We don't have to hold all the pieces, that we can trust you with it, that we can trust you with our family. We can trust you with our work and with our bills and with the things that weigh us down. And God, I pray that we can move in your direction towards health, towards life, towards peace. We love you, God. Thank you for everything that you've done for us. And thank you for first loving us. In your name I pray. Amen.